At my own sister's wedding, they sat me beside the restroom. That's not an exaggeration. That's exactly where they put me. A folding chair right outside the golden ballroom doors, across from a restroom arrow sign, and just close enough to hear the laughter I wasn't part of. Inside, violins were playing. Guests were clapping. Someone announced, "Please, family members to the front row." And I sat there, 33 years old, clutching my tiny purse like a lifeline, wondering what I'd done wrong this time. My name is Emily Parker, and that was the moment I realized I wasn't family anymore. I was furniture. I'd spent the last 2 weeks helping my sister Grace plan this wedding. I helped pick her colors, fixed her seating chart, even paid one of her vendors when her card stopped working. And now, I couldn't even see her walk down the aisle. I remember standing up, walking toward the usher at the ballroom door. "Excuse me," I said softly. "There must be some mistake. I'm the bride's sister." He looked at me with an uncomfortable smile. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. The main room's full. You're listed as an overflow guest." I blinked. "Overflow?" He nodded quickly like he wanted me gone. "Yes, ma'am. Overflow guests sit out here. You can still hear the ceremony." He smiled, like it was supposed to be comforting. I wanted to scream, but instead, I sat back down, my heartbeat echoing in my ears. The music started. The ballroom erupted in applause. And through the crack in the door, I saw her, Grace, radiant in a pearl white gown, clutching Dad's arm as he led her down the aisle. Both of them looked so proud, so happy. They didn't even glance toward the hallway. And that was when my phone buzzed, a text from Mom. "Mom, Emily, please don't make a scene today. It's Grace's moment. You already had your chance years ago." My chance? What chance had I ever been given? I sat there staring at that message until my vision blurred. Then, without saying a word to anyone, I stood up, walked out through the lobby, and into the cold November air. The sound of laughter followed me through the glass doors. And for the first time in years, I didn't turn back. Before I tell you what happened after I walked out of that wedding, make sure you stay to the end, because this isn't just about family betrayal. It's about what happens when the quiet one finally stops staying quiet. Grace Parker, 28 years old, perfect hair, perfect smile, perfect everything. She's the golden child, the miracle baby who could do no wrong. And me, I was the practice round. We grew up in Austin, Texas, in a house that always smelled like vanilla candles and quiet disappointment. Mom was a perfectionist. Dad was an accountant who believed emotions were a distraction. When Grace was born, Mom used to say, "She's my second chance to get everything right." And she meant it. Grace's first birthday party had balloons, a magician, and a clown. Mine, according to old photos, I got a store-bought cake and a paper hat. It didn't bother me at first. I was the sensible one, the good student, the helper. Grace was the entertainer. But somewhere along the line, sensible became invisible. When Grace failed a math test, Mom said, "She's just creative." When I failed one, she sighed, "Emily, I expected better." When Grace got a part-time job at a boutique, Dad took her out to dinner. When I got a scholarship to college, he said, "That's what you're supposed to do." By the time we were adults, I had learned how to shrink myself into a polite smile. I still remember the day Grace called to announce her engagement. "Em, guess what?" she squealed through the phone. "Daniel proposed last night. You're going to be my maid of honor, right?" Her excitement was contagious, and I found myself smiling even though I'd just pulled a 12-hour shift at the architecture firm. Of course, I said, I wouldn't miss it. If I'd known that maid of honor actually meant unpaid assistant, maybe I would have thought twice. Because from that moment on, my life revolved around Grace's wedding. She called me 5 times a day about flowers, guest lists, dress fittings, and every time she'd start with, "You're the only one I trust," and end with, "Can you cover this for me just until payday?" It wasn't the money that hurt. It was how natural it was for her to ask and how unnatural it felt to say no. 2 days before the wedding, she called again.
Hey, Em, can you pick up the cake tomorrow? The vendor won't talk to me since you used your card for the deposit. My card? I asked, frowning. Oh, come on, you know I'll pay you back. You're the best, seriously. I don't know what I'd do without you. Click. Call ended. That was Grace. Sugar-coated manipulation. The morning of the wedding felt surreal. The hotel looked like something out of a magazine, all glass chandeliers and floral walls. Everyone was dressed in shades of cream and gold. When I arrived, Grace's bridesmaids were laughing, taking selfies. Her maid of honor, not me, was helping her fix her veil. I froze. Wait, I thought... Grace turned, eyes wide with mock surprise. Oh, Em, I meant to tell you. We changed things last minute. You're still important, though. I told them you're handling the seating chart. The seating chart. That was the first time I realized I'd been quietly replaced. But I smiled anyway, like I always did, because fighting her felt like fighting gravity. And gravity always wins. I helped check the decorations, smoothed out tablecloths, and tried to swallow the lump in my throat when guests asked, "So, Emily, how does it feel to see your little sister finally settle down?" I laughed politely. "Wonderful," I said. "Just wonderful." And then the ceremony began. I walked toward the ballroom doors, only to be stopped by an usher with that cursed overflow card. Everything after that felt like slow motion. The closing doors, the muffled vows, the text from Mom. It was all a blur of disbelief and humiliation. So I left. By the time I reached my car, the sunset was already bleeding orange across the sky. I sat there for a long time, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. The lipstick smudged, the eyes tired. Then my phone buzzed. It was Grace's groom, Daniel. "Emily, please don't be upset. Grace told me you were anxious and needed a quiet spot." I stared at the message, jaw tight. Anxious? She told him I chose to sit outside? I typed out a reply. "Daniel, that's not true. They told me I was overflow." He read it instantly, but didn't respond. That silence told me everything. Grace's story had already won. When I got home that night, I threw my heels into the corner, wiped my face, and just sat there in the dark. Somewhere between anger and exhaustion, I whispered to myself, "Never again." But the next morning, the universe sent me a message. Literally. A video popped up in my inbox, sent by a coworker who'd attended the wedding. It was Grace, standing in the center of the ballroom, champagne in hand. "Family means everything to me," she said, smiling at the crowd, "even when some people can't handle seeing others happy." The crowd laughed. Then, faintly, I heard my mother's voice off camera. "She's talking about Emily." The crowd laughed louder. I dropped my phone. My hands trembled so badly I could barely breathe. they didn't just exclude me. They mocked me. Publicly. And in that moment, something inside me broke. Not like a crack, but like glass shattering in slow motion. The call that changed everything. A week later, my phone rang again. Unknown number. Miss Parker, this is Rachel Dean from the firm that handled your grandmother's estate. We've been trying to reach you. Estate? My grandmother passed away 5 years ago. Yes, ma'am, but there's been an issue with the property deed. We've recently discovered someone's been trying to transfer ownership without your authorization. I froze. Ownership of what? Your grandmother's house, Miss Parker. You're the legal heir. It's in your name. My heart stopped. My name? I whispered. Yes, ma'am, but someone's been claiming you gave up your rights years ago. A woman named Grace Parker. The room spun. Grace, my perfect sister, the one they said deserved everything, had tried to steal from me. The moment Rachel Dean said my sister's name, I felt the world tilt. Grace Parker, she repeated. She contacted us last month, claiming to act on your behalf. She provided a signed document. Except, Miss Parker, your signature doesn't match. I swallowed hard. She forged my signature? That's what it looks like. We halted the transfer, but we'll need you to come in and verify a few things. When I hung up, my hands were shaking. The phone screen blurred as tears welled up. My grandmother's house, the one place that had ever felt like home. The house sat on a quiet corner in Round Rock, surrounded by pecan trees and the faint smell of jasmine. Every summer, Grace and I would stay there. Grandma used to say, "This house will always belong to the one who remembers what love feels like." At the time, I didn't understand. Now, I did. Grandma had been more of a mother to me than Mom ever was. When she died, I remember Mom saying, "Don't worry about the paperwork, honey. We're taking care of it." I believed her. But now, I realized that was the day they started erasing me, legally, financially, emotionally. That evening, I called Mom. "Hi, sweetheart," she said brightly. "We've been meaning to check in. Grace told us you left the wedding early because you weren't feeling well." I closed my eyes. So that was the story now. "Mom," I said quietly, "why did Rachel Dean's office call me today?" The silence on the line stretched long. Then her voice dropped. Emily, I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. Grandma's house. It's in my name, and someone tried to transfer it." Another pause. Then softly, for heaven's sake, Emily, don't start this." "Start what?" "The drama. Grace has worked so hard, and Grace forged my signature," I shouted before I could stop myself. There it was, the crack in my voice I've been holding back for years. "You're imagining things," Mom said coolly. "That house doesn't even mean anything anymore. Grace just wanted to renovate it, that's all." Renovate it or own it? Don't twist my words. You've always had this jealousy issue. Jealousy. That word hit me like ice water. Every time I'd ever stood up for myself, that was their defense. Grace could lie, manipulate, humiliate me, but if I protested, I was jealous. I ended the call before she could say more. For the first time, I didn't apologize. But as soon as I hung up, I broke down.
Not just because of the betrayal, but because I realized I'd been trained to expect it. 2 days later, I walked into Dean and Associates, heart pounding. Rachel Dean, a calm woman in her 40s with kind eyes, greeted me with a handshake. "Emily, thank you for coming. We wanted to confirm a few details." She laid a folder on the table. Inside was a photocopy of a legal document, my supposed release of property rights. The signature at the bottom looked like mine, but it wasn't. "I didn't sign this. Where did you get it?" "It was emailed to us from your sister's address, attached to a statement claiming you had no interest in maintaining the property." I felt sick. "We reached out to verify, but her number she gave for you went to voicemail. When we asked for another contact, she said you were traveling abroad." "Traveling?" I laughed bitterly. "I was in her wedding 2 weeks ago." Unfortunately, this kind of family dispute happens more often than you'd think. "Yeah, I guess betrayal is the new love language." She gave me a sympathetic smile. "The good news is, as long as we have your confirmation, the property is yours, but you'll need to sign an affidavit to block any further attempts." I nodded, gripping the pen tightly. My hand trembled as I signed my real name, not the forged one. It felt like reclaiming a part of myself I didn't know I'd lost. The family group chat. That night, I opened the family group chat, the one Mom used to post photos of Grace's big achievements. The last message was from the wedding. Grace's bouquet photo, dozens of heart emojis from our relatives. I typed slowly. "Hey Grace, just came from Grandma's lawyer. They told me you tried to transfer the house." It took her less than a minute to reply. "Wow, seriously? You're going to accuse me of fraud now?" "Me. They have your email, your signature. Maybe you should check your own memory. You've always been dramatic." "Mom, please don't drag family matters into the group chat. This is unnecessary." "Dad, let's talk privately, not here." My hands shook as I watched the messages come in, not one of them asking if I was okay, not one of them caring about the truth. They only cared about the embarrassment. I typed one last line. "Don't worry, the truth won't stay private for long." Then I left the group. The next day, my old childhood friend Nora called me out of the blue. We hadn't spoken in years. "Emily, I don't know if I should tell you this, but your sister's been showing people pictures of Grandma's house. She said she and Daniel were moving in next month."
I froze. "She's what?" "Yeah. She said her sister gave it to her as a wedding gift." My jaw dropped. "A wedding gift? She told people I gave it to her?" "That's what she said. I thought it sounded weird. That's why I called." I sat on the edge of my bed, clutching the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Grace hadn't just stolen from me. She'd rewritten the story to make it look like I had blessed her theft. The betrayal burned in a way I couldn't describe. But for the first time, instead of breaking down, I began to plan. That weekend, I drove to Grandma's house. It looked almost exactly the same, except the gate was locked with a shiny new padlock. I laughed bitterly. She'd actually started changing things before even owning it. A neighbor, Mrs. Ruiz, peeked from her porch. "Is that you, Emily?" I smiled faintly. "Hi, Mrs. Ruiz. It's been a while." "Your sister's been here a lot lately, bringing furniture and boxes. Said you moved out of the country." I nodded slowly, my anger turning cold and focused. "Thank you for telling me." That night, I went back home and started gathering every old email, text, and receipt I could find. Proof of Grace's lies. And I printed them, one by one. For once, I wasn't going to stay silent. A week later, Mom called again. "Your father and I would like you to come over for dinner. Let's just talk about everything calmly." Her tone was sweet, but it felt rehearsed. Still, I agreed. Part of me wanted to believe maybe, they'd finally hear me. When I arrived, Grace was already there, sitting at the dining table in her usual perfection. Flawless hair, diamond ring glinting under the chandelier. Mom greeted me with a brittle smile. Dad didn't look up from his plate. "Emily, we're worried about you. You've been saying things that could really hurt this family." I laughed softly. "You mean the truth?" Grace sighed dramatically. You're blowing this out of proportion. The house was just a misunderstanding." "Really?" I slid a printed document across the table, her forged transfer form. Her face went pale. "Where did you—" Rachel Dean's business card landed beside the paper. "From the law firm," I said. "They confirmed everything." Mom jumped in quickly. "Emily, you have no idea what you're doing. That property is too much for you. Grace and Daniel could have used it for—" "For what?" I cut her off. "To erase me completely?" The room went silent. For the first time, no one had a clever excuse. Then Dad finally looked up, voice cold and measured. "Emily, don't make this ugly." "Ugly?" I laughed bitterly. "It already is." I stood, grabbed my bag, and walked toward the door. As I reached for the handle, Grace's voice followed me. "You're not going to tell anyone about this, right?" I turned, met her eyes, and smiled for the first time that night. "Oh, Grace, the truth doesn't need me to tell it. It tells itself." And I walked out. The next morning, I woke up to chaos. My phone was blowing up. Missed calls, messages, notifications. When I finally checked, I saw it. A local news headline. "Bride accused of forgery in family estate dispute. Investigation ongoing." My heart stopped. Attached was a photo of Grace, outside her boutique, reporters surrounding her. The story was out. But what I didn't know then was that this was only the beginning. When I left Grace's wedding that afternoon, I didn't even take my gift. The roses outside the venue smelled too sweet, like they were mocking me. My heels clicked on the pavement as I walked away, each step sounding louder than my heartbeat. For a moment, I thought I'd cry, but instead I laughed. A shaky, bitter sound that caught in my throat. Because deep down, I knew this wasn't new. It was just the final confirmation of what my family had always believed. Grace was everything, and I was the extra seat they didn't know where to put. When I got home, my phone buzzed nonstop. First, it was my mom. "Emily, how could you embarrass us like that? You walked out before the cake was cut. People noticed." Then my aunt. "Sweetheart, your mom is upset. You shouldn't have left. Everyone thought you refused to sit in the family section." Wait, refused? I stared at that word for a long time. Refused? I didn't refuse to sit in the family section. I was never offered a seat there. Still, the messages kept coming. Cousins, friends, even church members. The version of the story they were told made me sound like the villain. It was as if Grace had already written the script before I even left the hall. By evening, I made the mistake of opening the Parker family group chat. What I saw made my stomach twist. Grace had posted a picture from the wedding, her in that perfect white gown, smiling beside our parents. The caption read, Even family can struggle to share your happiness, but love wins anyway. And beneath it, a flood of comments. Don't worry about it, Grace. Some people just can't handle seeing others shine. God bless your marriage. You deserve all the joy. No one mentioned me by name, but they didn't need to. Everyone knew who some people meant. I threw my phone across the couch and sank to the floor. It felt like all the air in my apartment disappeared at once. For years, I had told myself that if I just tried harder, called more, visited more, smiled more, they'd finally see me as part of the family. But it didn't matter how soft I spoke or how much I gave. Grace's version of me always won. The jealous sister, the bitter one, the problem child. No one ever asked for my side. I didn't speak to anyone for 3 weeks. Work became a blur of deadlines and awkward smiles. My coworkers avoided asking about the wedding. They had seen Grace's Instagram too. In the evenings, I'd sit on my couch, scrolling through my phone like I was waiting for the universe to apologize. Nothing. Then one night, I finally opened a message I'd ignored. It was from Liam, Grace's husband's younger brother. We'd met once at the rehearsal dinner. Polite, quiet, the kind of man who noticed things others ignored. His message read, "Hey Emily, I know this is awkward, but I need to tell you something. It's about the seating arrangement." My fingers trembled as I typed back, "What about it?" A moment later, a photo appeared. It was a screenshot from Grace's phone, apparently. The text was between Grace and the wedding planner. "Grace, please move Emily's seat. She has a way of drawing attention and I don't want any drama." Planner, "Where should we move her?" Grace, "Somewhere out of the way. Maybe the side hallway near the restrooms. She'll understand." I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. Grace didn't just forget to seat me with the family. She planned it. Every humiliation, every whisper, every fake sympathetic look had been designed. I wanted to scream, to call her, to post it all online, but instead, I just sat there, numb. The next morning, Liam sent another message. "You're going to see a video soon. I didn't leak it, but it's already out there." I hadn't even processed what he meant before my phone started buzzing again. Texts, calls, social media notifications. I opened Instagram, and there it was. A video from the wedding, taken by a guest probably, during setup. Grace was standing beside the planner, pointing toward the reception hall. You could hear her voice clearly. "No, no, move that one out. That's Emily's. We can't have her sitting near the family table. She ruins every picture." And then she laughed. It wasn't a nervous laugh. It was cruel, calculated. The caption on the viral post read, "Bride caught insulting her own sister at her wedding." Within hours, the video had over 400,000 views. Comments poured in. "Imagine treating your sister like that. You can't buy class. This poor woman. Whoever Emily is, I hope she's okay." For the first time in my life, strangers defended me. By evening, my mother called. "Emily," she whispered, voice shaking, "did you see that video?" I didn't answer. "I had no idea, honey. Your sister told you you wanted to sit alone. She said you didn't want attention. I swear, we didn't know." I could hear her crying, and for a moment, I wanted to comfort her, to say it was fine, that I understood. But something inside me had changed. "Mom," I said quietly, "you believed her without asking me again." She went silent. That was the moment she realized the damage wasn't just about a seat. It was about years of being unseen. The next few days were chaos. Grace's Instagram comments were flooded. Her sponsors, she was a lifestyle influencer, started pulling back. She made a public statement, tearful and defensive. "It was a misunderstanding. My sister and I have a complicated relationship." But it was too late. People saw through it. For once, Grace's perfection couldn't hide her cruelty. Liam texted me again. "She's spiraling. Her brand deals are gone. I just thought you should know." I didn't reply. Not out of satisfaction, but exhaustion. Because when someone breaks your heart, their pain doesn't fix yours. A week later, I walked to the park near my apartment, the same one I used to visit as a teenager when I needed to think. I sat on the bench and watched the sunrise, the city still half asleep. That's when a woman approached me. She looked nervous. "Excuse me?" she said softly. "Are you Emily Parker?" I nodded, cautious. "I just wanted to say, I saw that video, and I'm sorry. My sister did something similar to me. Your story, it made me feel less alone." She smiled sadly and walked away. I sat there, stunned. For years, my silence had been invisible. Now it had a voice, and it was helping strangers heal. But peace never comes without one last storm. That evening, I got another call. It was from Grace. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Emily, I need to see you. Please, it's important." I almost hung up. But curiosity, or maybe closure, made me agree. "Tomorrow," I said, "at Mom's house." I didn't know it then, but that meeting would change everything. When I arrived the next day, Grace was already there. No makeup, no perfect smile, just red eyes and shaking hands. She looked up at me and said, "Emily, I didn't just move your seat. I need to tell you what else I did." My heart froze. "What do you mean?" She swallowed hard. "I lied about something much bigger."
When I pulled up to Mom and Dad's house that afternoon, the street looked smaller than I remembered, less like a stage and more like the place where the curtains finally fell. The maples that framed the yard had begun to turn, their leaves pocked with brown like old paper. The house itself held its usual calm, a neat porch, wind chimes, a mailbox with Mom's tiny ceramic bird on top. It all looked ordinary. Ordinary made cruelty feel sharper. I took a deep breath and walked up the steps, the board beneath my feet creaking with the same familiar sound it had when I was a child sneaking in after curfew. Mom opened the door before I reached for the knob. She looked small, as if the years had folded her down. Grace stood behind her in the hallway, bare-faced and pale, like someone had taken a perfect photograph and dragged an eraser across it. "Emily," Mom said, her voice a practiced blend of welcome and worry, "come in." I stepped inside and everything smelled of lemon cleaner and polished regret. The living room was arranged the way it always had been for family talks. Chairs pulled close, Dad's recliner at the end like a judge's bench. Grace sat on the couch, hands twisted in her lap. Her eyes were rimmed red. For a second, I almost felt something like pity, and then she looked at me, and everything flared back to hot anger. "Thank you for coming," Grace said quickly. Her voice trembled, but she tried to steady it with a smile. "I wanted to talk. I didn't know how else to fix this." I sat down across from her, the cushion giving a little sigh. Silence opened between us, the kind of silence that used to belong to telephone wires and waiting rooms. I let her have the first word because she asked for it, and because I rehearsed not shouting. I'd practiced calm. She began haltingly, like someone reading from a script she hated. I'm sorry about the hallway. I should have told them not to move you. I was embarrassed. I was afraid you'd do something. You thought you controlled the story, I finished for her. My voice was level. I could feel the old ache in my chest, the pressure of being small for so long. You thought you'd manage how everyone saw me. You made a plan to erase me for a photo. You sent a fake message to the planner and told them to move me. Grace flinched as if I slapped her. She started. You lied. You lied to Dad and Mom about what I wanted. You lied to Daniel about who I am. You lied to a lawyer to steal Grandma's house. Her hands went still. For the first time in years, she was quiet long enough for me to hear the hum of the refrigerator and the low wind outside. Her voice cracked. I know. I forged the paper. I sent emails. I thought if everyone believed it, it would become real. If you were out of the picture, I wouldn't have to compete for anything. The confession landed like ice. For a moment, I didn't know whether to be relieved she had admitted it or terrified by the cold precision of her words. Compete, I said slowly. Grace, what are you even talking about? We grew up in the same house. We both loved Grandma. There was no contest I agreed to. She closed her eyes. Ever since I was little, it felt like you were the one who could do no wrong. She swallowed. Mom would always say you were sensible, responsible. Like she only needed to breathe and things would be fine because you were there. People liked you. You made friends easily. You got scholarships. You were complete. My skin prickled. I thought of summers at Grandma's, of being patched up by a woman who taught me how to carve little wooden birds with a pocket knife. I thought of how safe Grandma made me feel. You were the one everyone doted on because you were loud and pretty and knew how to turn tears into applause. I took care of the details. I fixed things. Where's the contest in that? Grace's mouth trembled. It wasn't fair. Every time you were praised, Dad would say, "Good job, Emily," and I'd feel small. I thought if I could be everything, then maybe they would feel the way I wanted them to feel. I was tired of being second. I wanted the house because they would prove I mattered. That's not how love works, I said, and my voice was softer than I expected. There was none left in me for theatrics, only the hard facts. She lied, she tried to steal, and our parents had not stood beside me when confrontation was needed. Mom started crying quietly, the sort of weeping that sounds hollow when it's rehearsed. We were worried you would make a scene, she murmured, voice high with guilt. We thought saving the wedding would be easier for everyone.
And easier for who? I asked. Dad looked away. His jaw worked, then he sighed. We were scared, Em. Grace has always been more visible. When things happen, people notice her. You've always been quiet about it. We never thought she'd go this far. Scared? I repeated, incredulous. You were scared of me? You were scared of the person who left the ballroom because someone else said she was an overflow guest? I laughed, a small, bitter sound. You were scared to ask me what happened because you already wanted the story to be comfortable? The room went cold then, as if their house accepted the temperature of truth and held it. Grace sank back into the couch, the edges of her face raw. I didn't think, she whispered. I was so jealous of how easy it was for you. I hated that you could be so composed. I thought if I forced a new reality, they'd have to like what I did. But I didn't plan how far it would go. You planned far enough to forge legal documents, I said. You planned far enough to call the law firm pretending to be me. You planned far enough to turn my family against me. Dad cleared his throat. Grace, this is criminal. You forged the signature. She nodded slowly, as if reciting a fact she'd been trying to avoid. I know. I'm so sorry. I was gonna put everything back, I swear. I didn't mean to hurt you like this. Intent doesn't fix damage, I said. Forgiveness can come later if the law doesn't ask questions. Right now, you need to tell the whole story. To everyone. Grace's face crumbled. She pulled a crumpled tissue from her sleeve. I'll tell them, she said, voice raw. I'll go on camera, whatever. I'll say it all. That was the beginning of the unravel. It didn't happen all at once. It was a slow, awful curtain dropping. For a week, Grace rehearsed what truth looked like. She apologized in private to some people, then in public to others. Her statements sounded like someone reading apologies off cue cards. Clean, contrite, but lacking the jagged honesty of real regret. And the public didn't let her off easy. People had seen the video. The viral clip was the seed. The rest was fertilizer. Comments stacked beneath her posts like little nails. Grace's image cracks, the headlines read. Influencer and family scandal. Sponsors paused. One by one, offers for sponsored posts dried up like puddles under a hot sun. Daniel, her husband, who'd been quick to dismiss my version of events, started to look tired in photos. I'd seen him at the boutique after everything began to break. His jaw was set as if he'd learned to brace against pressure. But what people saw outside didn't always match what a house feels like inside. At first, Grace's public implosion made me feel vindicated. Strangers who had never met me reached out and said they believed me, that they were sorry it happened to me. Comments popped up beneath neutral news stories. She did not deserve that. Family cruelty is the worst kind. Those small human confessions felt like warmth. But warmth is a fragile currency when your whole childhood is based on withholding. When the chaos calmed, I found myself alone in a new way. People were interested in the scandal, not in the person left at the center of it. Reporters asked for a statement. Friends asked if I wanted to go on camera. I refused. I didn't want my voice to be a spectacle. I wanted something quieter, to heal. Healing isn't linear. It rarely looks like a montage from a movie with inspirational music swelling underneath. Instead, it arrives in small, stubborn acts. I started seeing a therapist. I made an appointment with Dr. Patel, who had a peaceful office and an enormous fern that drooped like an open hand. On my first day in her office, I expected to be asked what had happened. Instead, she asked, "How do you feel when you hear silence?" It caught me off guard. Invisible, I said, honest, like a ghost that people remember to check on only when there's a leak. She nodded. We treat silence as absence, but sometimes silence is a hiding place for pain. We'll teach it to speak. And so I began to learn. I learned to say no. I learned that boundaries were not punishments, but tools. I set one the first week after therapy. No family meetings without a mediator. When I told Mom and Dad, there was an immediate defensive pull, but also a tremor of respect. If you were going to take something from me, I was saying with the quietness I had practiced, then you will have to face the consequence. Grace did face consequence, not only from public scrutiny, but from the people closest to her. Daniel, under pressure from his family and his own conscience, began to distance himself. He and Grace had always been the couple who presented an image of unity when they walked into rooms. After the scandal, he started coming to events alone or not at all. I learned from Liam, Daniel's brother, that Daniel struggled with the idea that his marriage had been built on the foundation of gratitude for social standing rather than real connection. He told me, in a message that arrived unexpectedly, "I always liked you, Em. I wish things were different." Liam's confession mattered to me,
Not because of romantic possibility, it wasn't that, but because it was a proof that not everyone in their circle was blind. People were waking up. Grace's fall came in slow motion. Sponsors left. The boutique had fewer walk-ins. Friends who at once called her every morning to gossip began replying less. A lot of people thought her punishment was too public, too cruel. A few whispered that the world didn't owe me satisfaction. Most of all, I think the most painful part for Grace was not losing her audience, but losing her story. People had bought her narrative that she was flawless, deserving, the natural star. When that was pulled away, she was left with the domestic, stubborn difficulty of living in the same house as the woman she betrayed. I don't think that kind of intimacy sewn into betrayal heals overnight. The most unexpected turn for me was how quiet strength started to feel like an old friend. I took the money I'd saved and started a small design practice at home, something I'd been too timid to open up in my 20s. It was honest work. I liked building things that meant something, like repairing a chair or designing a small coffee shop's logo. I learned to accept compliments without immediately backpedaling into self-dismissal. If someone said, "You did good," I tried not to ask them why they said it. I let it land.
Then, on an ordinary day 9 months after the wedding, I received an invitation. A local nonprofit that supported women affected by family violence, not just physical but emotional, asks me to speak at their annual gathering. They'd heard my story, and they thought it might help others find the courage to name what hurt them. I felt my throat tighten when I said yes. Speaking felt like the exact shape of my old fear, but now I wanted my voice to be useful. I wanted it to be a pointer, not a pitfall. The night of the event, I wore a simple navy dress and held my notes in my hand. My voice was steady when I began, but I allowed pauses to hang like bridges so the audience could cross at their own pace. I told them small truths, how silence had been a comfort and a trap, how I had learned to ask for help, how truth doesn't always fix everything, but it starts a different kind of life. Halfway through, I heard a noise at the back of the hall, the soft shuffle of someone taking a seat. I glanced up. Through the dim, I could see a figure sitting by the exit, small and hunched, head bowed. My throat constricted. Grace. She hadn't made it to the front. She sat in a back row, hands folded, eyes on the program. People noticed her presence, and a ripple of whisper moved through the room like a breeze. I had a choice in that moment I hadn't allowed myself to make years before. I could let old anger write the rest of my story, or I could choose a new response. I talked about boundaries. I talked about therapy. I spoke of the mundane, steady acts that build a life, paying bills, planting a pot of basil, sending a note to an old friend. I did not point at her. I did not ask for public retribution. I told a truth in its plainest form, that healing is a practice and that forgiveness, if it comes, will not be a performance. Then I closed my talk with the sentence I'd practiced into the night. Sometimes silence is not weakness. Silence is the sound of listening to the person you were trying to become. And when silence finally speaks back, it will say, "I am done being small for anyone else's comfort." After the applause, a woman came up to me and hugged me so tight I could feel the steady beat of her heart. She said, "Thank you. I'm leaving an abusive marriage tomorrow because of you." That night, I went home and sat on my couch. A small, unremarkable chair that had belonged to Grandma, the one she used when she reviewed bills at kitchen tables. I ran my fingers along the armrest and smiled. The house felt different than the one I'd fled from months ago. It smelled of basil from the window garden I had started and the quiet of someone who had found a voice. Weeks later, Grace reached out. Her message was short. "Can we talk?" she typed. We met at a coffee shop, not at Mom's house, not in a place where walls had ears and stories were currency. We sat across from each other with mugs cooling in our hands. She looked hollowed out and contrite in a way that was almost human. She said, "I ruined so many things. I wanted your life." I corrected her gently. "You wanted what you thought mine was, not what it actually was. You wanted applause, not the work behind it." She nodded like someone accepting the truth of a wound. She said, "I don't expect forgiveness. I expect to work the rest of my life to learn how to be honest." There is a peculiar relief in hearing someone say they will earn their way back. It's not immediate grace, but it is the scaffolding of change. We did not hug that day. We did not erase the past, but we set the terms for a future where conversation would replace assumed narratives. Months after that, I sold a small design to a local cafe that had been a client of Grace's before everything fell apart. The owner told me, "I wanted to work with you for your solidity. Grace's style was shiny. Yours feels like a place to rest." When he said it, I thought of Grandma carving tiny birds and how small things build homes. As for the house, Grandma's house, it never left my name. The lawyers confirmed the forged documents were invalid. Grace paid restitution for the lawyer fees and the attempted transfer. She never lived there. It became, in the slow and ordinary way of things, a rental to a young family that planted sunflowers in the backyard. When I drove past one Sunday, there were children chasing each other across the lawn, their arms flailing, voices high. I felt something close to peace. I told this story to strangers, to friends, to my therapist. I told it at small gatherings, at Bible study, at the cafe where the owner would nod in a way that said he'd heard the edges of hard truths before. Once, a woman stopped me in the supermarket line and said, "Your voice saved me." She meant it. She meant the long way through the small, honest acts. If there is a lesson here, it is not that karma is instantaneous or that public shame is a balm. It is simply this: the quiet you believe protects you can become your prison. And when you allow truth to be heard, not shouted, not weaponized, you begin to excavate a life that belongs to you. Boundaries are the tools, therapy is the slow work, and sometimes the voice you feared using becomes the map out. As I close this chapter of my life, I sit in my apartment with the windows open and the smell of rain on pavement drifting inside. My phone buzzes occasionally with messages, some from family, awkwardly polite, some from strangers, surprising and tender. Grace sent a message last week. It said, "I'm sorry for the years." I replied, "I hear you." Not because I owed anything, but because I had learned that sometimes hearing someone is a beginning. Not a full stop, not a license to return to the old roles, just a beginning. So I ask you now, the person listening or watching this, have you ever been made small so someone else could look bigger? Have you ever left a room because you were not given the seat you deserved? Share your story in the comments below. Tell me. We'll listen. Because silence grows heavy when it has no company. And if you are sitting with a quiet wound, know this: the quiet will not hold you forever. At some point, it speaks back. And that voice, your voice, will be the one that says, "I am done being small for anyone else's comfort." Have you experienced betrayal like this? Share your story in the comments. I read everyone.